Today on Straight Talk Africa, we will walk you through the Great Lakes region and the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a political conflict between the government of President Joseph Kabila and the M23 rebels remains unresolved. Some political analysts and Africa watchers are debating possible solutions aimed at restoring peace and stability to the second largest country on the continent. That's coming up next, right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from Voice of America studios here in Washington. It's Wednesday, December 19th. I am Shaka Sali. Today, we'll discuss the continuing crisis in the Great Lakes region with a focus on the peace talks in the Ugandan capital Kampala between the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels. The situation in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo remains volatile. We have two reports. First, from my colleague, Paul Cisco.
Representatives of the government in the Democratic Republic of Congo and M23 rebels have been meeting in Kampala, Uganda, in talks mediated by the International Conference of the Great Lakes region. According to a joint statement issued Tuesday, they've agreed on procedural rules for peace talks aimed at stemming the violence in the eastern Congo. No more details were provided. Also late Tuesday, U.S. President Barack Obama warned Rwandan President Paul Kagame by phone that any support for the M23 rebel group is inconsistent with Rwanda's desire for stability and peace. The M23 rebels, who last month took Goma, have withdrawn under international pressure, but the situation remains tense and chaotic. The U.S. President also stressed the importance of permanently ending all support to armed groups in Congo. A November report from United Nations experts says the M23 rebel movement is backed by Rwanda and to a lesser degree Uganda, saying the government of Rwanda continues to violate the arms embargo by providing direct military support to the M23 rebels. Adding, senior officials of the government of Uganda have also provided support to M23 in the form of direct troop reinforcements. Both governments deny the report's findings. The rebels who launched the rebellion in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in April and seized Goma last month are supposed to have withdrawn completely December 1st as part of the ceasefire brokered by the East African officials meeting in Kampala. Paul Cisco, VOA News.
Thanks, Paul, for that report. Meanwhile, a fragile peace is holding in Goma, but according to David Axe, the devastating humanitarian crisis there is worsening.
Goma, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Residents flee a city that was the main battleground in a 9-month conflict. In April, rebels turned army soldiers from the M23 group once again took up arms against the government, calling for implementation of a stalled 2009 peace deal. The United Nations says the fighting in and around Goma has displaced no fewer than 130,000 people. The dire situation has caused many families to be torn apart.
The feeling in my heart is that I want to die. I can't eat, since I can't find my children.
Goma and neighboring towns have changed hands several times since November. Goma is currently held by government and UN troops, but that has not ended the humanitarian crisis. Even before the present fighting, UN camps in North Kivu province housed tens of thousands of refugees. Now the UN says the number has swelled to more than 100,000, with another 800,000 displaced people living in host communities.
I feel frustrated and haunted about this situation as a Congolese aid worker. As a country, we have all of the resources imaginable. We have very fertile soil. There should be enough for everyone. But it's impossible to formulate agriculture development programs. We cannot do anything because this place is always a war zone.
The Goma battle has revealed deep flaws in the Congolese army that could undermine a lasting peace. A government counterattack against rebels in Sake, near Goma, in late November ended in disaster for the army, which appears to, at times, lack discipline, leadership, and adequate supplies despite years of U.S. support. International mediation persuaded the M23 rebels to turn Goma and its surroundings over to UN peacekeepers on December 1st. But in the absence of a formal ceasefire, the rebels are once again preparing for combat. David Axe for VOA News.
Thanks, David, for that report. Joining us here in our Washington studios are our two distinguished guests, Dr. Peter Palm, Director Michael S. Ansari Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, a public policy group whose mission is to promote constructive U.S. leadership and engagement in international affairs. It's a pleasure, of course, always, frankly, to host you on Straight Talk Africa, Peter.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Shaka.
You're most welcome. I remember that the last time I actually saw you was at the center when you were hosting Gabonese President Ali Bongo.
Yes.
Well, Mlegwa Zihindura himself, president of the Center for Political and Strategic Studies based in Bukavu and Kinshasa. Mr. Zihindura formerly served as the spokesperson for President Joseph Kabila. Well, Mlegwa, again, it's really a pleasure having you again on Straight Talk Africa.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be in Washington. The weather is very beautiful here today.
It's many years ago since we last had you on the show, because in fact I recall you joined us then upstairs in Studio 18, the famous Studio 18.
Exactly. But I'm very pleased to be in this same studio, the different studio today.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Milton Alimadi, founder and publisher of the Black Star News, one of New York's investigative newspapers. He joins us from our New York studios. Well, thank you so much, Milton, for joining us.
Thank you, Brother Chaka. Thank you for hosting me today.
Well, it's nice having you again on the show.
My pleasure.
Later in the program, we will give you, the audience, a chance to call and talk with our guests. The number to call is 202-619-3111. The U.S. country code is 1. Let me come to you directly, Peter. The first question, frankly, I think is, what is the significance, if any, of President Barack Obama's telephone call to Rwandan President Paul Kagame about the conflict in the Eastern DRC?
Well, I think it's important for the U.S. government to be engaged in this region. It's a very critical region. Geopolitically, there are very sensitive diplomatic tensions and security tensions in that region, and the U.S. needs to be very engaged. And at the level of the head of state, certainly, especially when the head of state is able to control his forces and those of his country, which is certainly the case with President Kagame, who runs one of the more efficient states in the region. So it's important to reach out to them and deal with them at that level. It's much, I think I welcome the President's call insofar as a change from sending representatives or sending other people. One has to engage African leaders at the very senior level from the U.S. side, so I'm very glad that that happened.
But what about the fact that Rwandan President Paul Kagame denies to have any involvement whatsoever in that conflict?
Well, I'm not on the ground there, and I can't say whether he's involved or not. There's certainly the UN experts report, although one can have a few questions about some of the people involved in the writing of that report. So I think it's up to the people on the ground to speak to what is actually happening there. I would make the argument that a different argument. I know it's not the position of the Rwandan government, but I can understand rationally, I'm not justifying it or promoting it, but I can understand rationally why they might be involved. Certainly if the United States had the same level of insecurity on its immediate border, we would probably drag our officials out for incompetence or criminal negligence if they weren't engaged in that situations. So I'm not surprised if history reveals that indeed Rwanda is involved.
What about you, Mlegwa Zihindura? And I think it is particularly special to you because the last time I checked, you actually come physically from that particular area.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful. And people in Congo are very grateful for the phone call that President Obama made to Rwandan president. I think it's not a secret to anyone that Rwanda is involved in this war in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's been a lot of reports showing that Rwanda is very involved with this war. There's a lot of evidence. Speaking about denying by the Rwandan president, this is not the first time that he has denied being involved in the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In 1998, when he launched the war with the RCD rebellion, he continued denying. The war started in August, but it took Nelson Mandela in November of 1998 to say, listen, the evidence is there. Everybody knows it's there, so you need to come up and say exactly that you're in Congo. And indeed, he was in Congo. So I regret the statement from my colleague to say that he can understand somehow why Rwanda is involved. But there is no basis for Rwandan involvement in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The reason why Rwanda is involved in this war now is for three reasons. The first one is to protect a fugitive, General Bosco Ntaganda, from international justice. He's a criminal being sought by international justice. And so Rwanda is trying to protect him.
Why should they protect him?
Well, because they have interest with him. And
he's not Laurent Nkunda?
Well, it's certainly not Laurent Nkunda, but he's at the service of Rwanda. He's at the service of Rwanda. And so Rwanda is trying to protect him. The second reason is that Rwanda is trying to create a buffer zone in Congo. They want to take a certain part of Congo and create it as a buffer zone against what they call today the FDLR. The third reason is that Rwanda wants to do what we call in French la somalisation de l'Est de la RDC.
What does that mean for those of us who may be illiterate in French?
Rwanda wants to transform Congo like Somalia, where it would be lawless everywhere. I know Somalia is much better now, but they want that lawlessness because then they can be able to control all the illegal traffic of mines and other issues in the eastern part of Congo.
We'll come to that. What about you, Milton? What is the significance, if any, of U.S. President Barack Obama's telephone call to Rwandan President Paul Kagame, in your view?
Well, Shaka, first of all, my colleague who just spoke right now took my entire presentation. I don't know what to add to what he just said. But in terms of the call from the President of the United States, I think it certainly elevates it to a very high level now. Because now, General Kagame will not be able to make any of the preposterous denials anymore. Because once the United States President is engaged and involved, it means that most international media will now take this issue seriously and focus the media attention that it needs. I mean, look, the United Nations report by the group of experts says that, in fact, Bosco Ntaganda is a nominal leader, and that, in fact, they report to the Rwanda Chief of Staff of the Rwanda Defense Forces, who in turn reports to the Minister of Defense, General James Kabarebe. And of course, the Minister of Defense reports to the President. And the same UN report found that Ntaganda owns 2 homes in Kampala, and that in fact the leadership of M23 reports directly on a regular basis to Uganda's presidential advisor on military affairs, General Salim Saleh, as well as Uganda's chief of police, General Kalehura. So let's stop with the pretense. The people of Congo deserve much better. This is a war of aggression, and a war of aggression, as we all know, has serious consequences. We saw what happened in West Africa with former Liberian President Charles Taylor when he supported that criminal insurgency in Sierra Leone. He was ultimately indicted, he was tried, and he's now serving a 50-year sentence. Why should it be any different for General Kagame and General Museveni? That is my question.
Very interesting. Before we pause for a short break, we would like to remind you that Straight Talk Africa is on the social networking website Facebook. Just put in the keyword Straight Talk Africa and become a fan and connect with other friends of the Voice of America. We'll be right back with you, so please don't go away.
Goma Crisis. M23 refers to a March 23, 2009 peace deal that ended a 4-year rebellion in eastern Congo and integrated former rebels into the Congolese army. The rebels claim the government violated the deal by not respecting their ranks and or providing enough resources to ensure the protection of mainly Tutsi refugees in the border region with Rwanda. After a series of disputes, hundreds of former rebels mutinied against the government in April, leading to the group's formation. M23 rebels say they want the government to sign a new peace treaty. The group is increasingly exploiting local frustrations over the government's inability to provide services.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. What's your opinion about today's topic? Call us at 202-619-3111, U.S. country code 1. When you call, please remember, ask only one question, keep it very brief, and turn down the volume on your radio or television. And now, let's go back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Iman Iragabira Shaka. Let me come back to you, Milton. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
If what you just said, frankly, is anything to go by, then it would seem to me that you just introduced a new dimension. Are you suggesting from what you said so far that unless and until perhaps you have direct Rwandan involvement in the ongoing discussions in Kampala, there is no deal that is going to come out that makes sense?
It would not make sense. And the viability and the durability, how long such an agreement would last, would be questionable. And obviously, at this stage, we even have to raise a very critical question. Why is the peace negotiations going on in the capital of one of the countries that has been identified in the UN report as an aggressor country?
Well,
I think that's a serious concern.
But I think we have to point out also that that particular country in question also denies to have any involvement in what is going on in the Eastern DRC.
Shaka, I would be willing to lend more credibility to a report by the United Nations group of experts rather than the leadership in Kampala. The report, after all, has been found credible by the United States administration. The United States administration has accepted it, the British have accepted it, and these are key players in the region. In fact, Senator Coons has insisted that not only the leadership of M23, but the leadership of the countries that are really sustaining M23 also should be held accountable. And I think that will send a very serious signal that wars of impunity will not be tolerated. Since World War II, wars of aggression have been regarded and looked at very seriously. It is a war of aggression that has made Eastern Congo and the Kivu regions ungovernable. Look at the other side of Congo. Why is it that we don't have a similar kind of conflict on the western end of Congo? Why is it? Because Angola and the Congo Republic are not similarly intervening in the affairs of Congo as Rwanda and Uganda are doing on the eastern side.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the telephone callers who are, of course, the lifeline of the show. Let's go to Claude. Claude Gatebuke from Nashville. Good afternoon, Claude.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shaka. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, unfortunately, I happen to be a doctor, but without a clinic, Claude, so you have to be very careful.
It's quite all right.
What is your question, Claude?
My question is, why is it that those who advocate for the breakup of Congo, one, never listen to the voices of Congolese who almost unanimously are opposed to the breakup of Congo. And number two is, why is it that those who advocate for the breakup of Congo never talk about the issues of interventionism and holding accountable the perpetrators? Some of and the ones named in the latest report are, the Rwandan Minister of Defense, James Kabarebe, and the Rwandan president, as well as the Ugandan regime's intervention in Congo, as well as lack of democracy within those countries, the jailing of opponents, the killing of dissidents by the Rwandan government inside and outside of Rwanda, as well as the treatment of opposition members inside of Uganda. Why is it that those who advocate for the breakup of Congo against the will of the Congolese never look to even the will of the people in the region at all?
But how do you respond, for example, to the fact that the Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni both say they have actually been able to hold democratic elections, and in fact that they rule because they have the mandate of their people?
On that one, even Stevie Wonder, who's blind, can see that is a big lie. For someone to claim 93% of the vote is unbelievable. It's unheard of. It's impossible. And not only that, actually gets 93% of the vote, awards himself 93% of the vote, and then actually celebrates it publicly. That used to be done by Stalin of Russia, where he said he wasn't so much interested on who votes or what the votes are. What was most interesting is who counted the votes, and that's what it is. These two presidents in the region are holding everybody hostage, basically. All the institutions belong to them, the military, the election councils, and everything. So, of course, they're going to call it democratic just by name, but it isn't democratic. And we know that when you're jailing all of your opponents or killing everyone that has a legitimate chance against you, it's neither free and it's not fair to actually run that kind of election. And if that's what democracy is, then I guess we've achieved it in those regions, but definitely not the idea of democracy that we enjoy so much in our Western democracies.
Claude, if I may ask, where do you come from?
I am originally from Rwanda.
I see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I should perhaps inform you that your President Paul Kagame is not the man who holds the record for the highest percentage in apparently winning a democratically held election on the continent. That goes to Equatorial Guinea. Theodore Obiang, 97%. Let me come to you, Peter. You heard, of course, the caller. You heard Ali Mahdi make his point. How do you weigh into this?
Okay. Well, let me respond. I think the call, to put a bit of balance in it, certainly the caller raised some important questions, and those have been addressed, but one also has to look at, he didn't talk about the so-called election last year in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which everyone from former President Carter to the European Union to the country's Roman Catholic bishops, Cardinal Monsengo, called it an illegitimate result. So if we begin to throw rocks, a lot of glass houses are going to be broken, and one has to be balanced in that approach.
As a matter of fact, I might add for your benefit and the benefit of the audience that according to the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is one of the worst governed nations on the continent besides the Sudan. How do you react to that?
Well, I think, again, for me, that's far from the truth, because these people do not live in Congo. Let's look at the history of Congo.
And you live there?
Absolutely. And I live in the...
Do you like living there?
Absolutely. It's my country. I love it.
But the M23 don't like living in the Congo.
But I will get to the M23, especially why would the M23 love Congo and do what they're doing in Congo? If you love your country, would you be going on a rampage, killing people, taking people's tongues in Ruchuru and cutting them off and so on and so forth? You know, you wouldn't do that. But let's go back to this whole issue of governors. Let's look at the history of the country. We have the 1960, the death of Lumumba, and then we have Mobutu in a dictatorship for 32 years. Look at President Kabila taking the government after the assassination of the late president, and look at the place where he found the country and the place where the country is today. I think people need to look at that. People need to look at the progress that has been done. It's the first time ever in the Democratic Republic of Congo for Congolese people by themselves to organize elections. It was the first time ever to organize elections. Are we saying that the elections in Congo are perfect? No. Are we saying that
you mean the elections organized under our friend Pastor Mulunda?
Yes. The elections were organized by the Electoral Commission. And Mulunda happens to be the president of the Electoral Commission. But, you know, everybody that is always saying, oh, they cheated, I was during the elections.
But was it, frankly, if you were to talk to us, from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Congolese heart and soul.
Yes.
Is it an electoral commission that you find to be credible, really?
Okay. I will give you a very good example. You know Mulunda and you know me. Mulunda is my best friend. I was running for parliament and I lost the election. If Mulunda was helping everybody cheat the election like people are trying to portray him, he could have helped me. I'm one of his best friends. So why didn't he help me? Of course not. I mean, these are things that people want to say because, one, a lot of people did not believe we could organize these elections. It was almost sort of a challenge for many people. You know, they had observers who came, and 2 days before the elections were even held, they left. They said it's impossible for the elections to be organized. And we organized the elections, and many people were surprised. And because we organized the elections, it's just a lot easier for them to just discount and say, well, there was nothing there. The elections were good elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm ready to bet anything that our elections were more fair than the elections in Rwanda.
But how do you respond, frankly, to some people who are saying that no, that was not an election. It was, in their words, not mine, a selection. Because they say, for example, Pastor Mulunda happens to be related to President Joseph Kabila, for example. Are they related?
First of all, Mulunda and Joseph are not related. The President and Mulunda are not related. They may come from the same region, but they are not related. It's not because you're from North Carolina that you become of the same family with somebody else. No. But the elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo were free and fair elections, particularly for a country. But what I'm saying is this. Let me bring you back to something quickly, Shaka. I need people, because people are praising Rwanda. People are praising Uganda. But elections are not free and fair in those two countries.
We'll come to that. Peter?
Let's move beyond the elections. That's certainly the past, and history will eventually, hopefully, enlighten us to that. But let's look at effective governance. The government, let's assume the election was legitimate, is yet to respect its own constitution with respect to sharing of resources. The Congolese constitution is a fine document. It's not just simply not respected. 40% of revenue is supposed to be devolved to the provinces and then to the territorial local entities. Yet we look at the budgets, the government's own figures, the number is probably closer to 15%. So they're starving the regions of the funds they need to carry out the basic services they're entrusted to them. And this despite the fact that last year the revenues of the government increased by about 10%, the year before by about 89%. So there is improvement in revenue coming in, and it's not going out. It's going somewhere.
I see. Well, we have to go for a break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the discussion. A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. Today's topic, the continuing crisis in the Great Lakes region. If you wish to participate in our discussion, please call us at 202-619-3111. US country code is 1. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, so please don't go away.
Goma crisis, M23 rebels. Who's in charge? Colonel Sauntani Makenga is the leader of the rebel group M23. According to a recent report from the UN Security Council's group of experts, the de facto chain of command of M23 includes General Bosco Ntaganda, wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, and culminates with the Minister of Defense of Rwanda, General James Kabarebe. M23 now has around 4,000 armed rebels and continues to recruit more. Like other rebel groups, it has developed its own logistics and administration in the North Kivu province.
Voice of America provides you with African and world news around the clock. Wake up with Daybreak Africa, and in the evening, listen to African News Tonight, and on weekend, it's Nightline Africa. You can also hear VOA newscast at the top of each hour and World News Now. Visit us online to listen to your favorite news shows or check the latest updates. Go to www.voaafrica.com.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number is 202-619-3111 and the U.S. country code is 1. Call us collect and we'll pay for the call. Or call direct and we'll call you right back. Remember, keep your questions brief. And now, back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Iman Nagavira Shaka. And hello, I'm Shaka Sali, and you're welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. If you have just joined us, today's topic, the continuing crisis in the Great Lakes region, with a focus on the peace talks in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, between the government and the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels. Our distinguished guests are Dr. Peter Palm, Director Michael S. Ansari Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, a public policy group whose mission is to promote constructive U.S. leadership and engagement in international affairs. Muregwa Zihindura, President of the Center for Political and Strategic Studies based in Bukavu and Kinshasa. Mr. Zihindura formerly served as the spokesperson for President Joseph Kabila. And Milton Alimadi, founder and publisher of the Black Star News, one of New York's investigative newspapers. He joins us from our New York studios. I have to say, gentlemen, I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the three of you.
It's our privilege to be here with you.
Well, you're most welcome. What about this business of lying? Do presidents lie or they don't lie?
Well, I don't know which president you're talking about, but I know that the Rwandan president and his counterpart from Uganda have not been telling the truth about what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
It's very interesting, Mulegwa, that you raise that point, because frankly, it reminds me of a moment back in 1999. I was in Lubumbashi, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, interviewing the then Congolese President Laurent Désiré Kabila. And I remember putting the third question to him. I was afraid that he was going to terminate the interview, and that would be it, because I said, what about this Lusaka Accord? I have interviewed Kagame, I've interviewed Museveni, I've interviewed Susan Rice, I've interviewed all these people. They say that it cannot work because, in their words, you happen to be a pathological liar. How do you react to that? I thought he was going to terminate the interview. And Mulego, we were together actually in Lubumbashi at that time, I remember. And he calmly looked at me and said, wait a minute, Shaka. Let's face it, you and I know that the presidents of Rwanda and Uganda have been saying for 3 months they did not have a single soldier on Congolese territory. 3 months later, they say, yes, they are in the Congo because they have to secure their security interests. They have to fight against who they characterize as genocidaires. So I think you have a point that, sometimes presidents also lie. They say half-truths. But let's come to the Congo as we see it today. Milton, you raised a very interesting point when you criticized an article written by a one Dr. Peter Palm, who is right here. He wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times. Why don't we give him a chance, frankly, to explain precisely what he meant, and then you can respond?
I would appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm sure many Africans would appreciate that.
Yes. The op-ed piece, most people essentially concluded that all you meant was that the Congo is simply too big to be governed. It should be partitioned.
No,
is that what you meant?
No, what I meant was to raise the possibility that we have to look and think creatively about solving problems that are long-running, not just in the Congo, but throughout Africa. And to give Africans a voice and policy in those resolutions, and a policy option that we give other parts of the world. Everyone knows the violence, the injustice that was the result and the motivation, quite frankly, of the colonial enterprise in the 19th and early 20th century. Africans didn't have a choice about the boundaries that were created by the colonial powers. And the case of the Congo is particularly tragic, as we know, because it was the greed of one man and the violence which this region was put together. But since then, we've held the static view that what was created in injustice, born in sin, so to speak, must remain. And my point simply is not to say that that must be the case. I simply say we have allowed borders to be shifted, stability to be gained in other parts. Europe's map today was not what it was in 1989, was not what it was in 1945, and Europe is much more stable and peaceful. Same with Asia, same with other parts of the region. But in Africa, we insist. The international community passes resolutions and says, Africans, you must. Now, if you want to hold together, if that is the choice of the people, I support it, and I would give them but we have to give them the option, instead of the UN coming in and saying, the territorial integrity must stand irrespective of what local conditions, irrespective of good governance or lack thereof, irrespective of what your desires are. That has to be an option that has to be on the table. And what they decide is up to Africans. Outsiders have no right to tell them. I'm simply not prescribing. I'm raising an option which should be considered among others. And the choice is ultimately made by people like my friend here and his countrymen. It's their choice. They have to make it. And we have to respect that choice. But we have to give them the choice as an option instead of saying, this is the only solution you're allowed. And we're going to use force, Chapter 7 resolutions from the Security Council, to enforce the choice which was not made by you, but was made by colonial powers a century ago, and which has brought you very little in return.
There is a legitimate case, some might say, of Somaliland, which in fact used to be ruled by the British before independence. Have you, at any one point, written in favor of the fact that they want to be independent again? And in fact, they have been holding elections that have been observed by the international community. They are some of the freest, some of the most really fair and credible elections. Have you written in favor of their struggle?
I've written extensively about Somaliland. I was an international observer at their last presidential election 2 years ago. And there's perhaps an even better case. The people themselves have voted quite literally both for succession in the ratification of a constitution, in repeated free elections. They have a vibrant free press. They have multi-party contestations of elections. They have a business community that's booming. They even have a new Coca-Cola bottling factory. And they've maintained security of their neighbors and respect the interests of their neighbors. And I've written extensively, even in this past year, about the international community needing to respect that instead of forcing them into a return into what was a very bad marriage with the rest of Somalia.
Very interesting. Now, Ali Mahdi.
Yes, sir.
You have said, among other things, that PAM hopes to change the narrative.
Yes.
It's Congo itself that's the problem, not the invaders. The country is simply caught too big to succeed and caught. PAM writes, talk about blaming the victim. This is akin to saying Hitler wasn't at fault for invading France. The French were divided and prone to surrendering. Or maybe Was the fall of France during the World War Hitler's fault or the divided French?
Absolutely, and I still agree with that sentiment. And by the way, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm glad that I'm meeting a different Peter Pham today. What he just said right now is not at all similar to what he wrote in his op-ed in the New York Times. The tone of the op-ed was that we should not be entertaining issues such as boundaries and sovereignty when it comes to a place like the Congo, which essentially has shown and proven that it is ungovernable the way it now exists, and that a solution is to stop with these diplomatic niceties and just let it fall apart, as he said. And I invite people to go back and read that article, which is on the New York Times, December 1st. But I'm glad he's making some amendments today, which did not exist in his article. He's saying that, thank you, he's saying it, that African voices, presumably including Congolese, should be taken into consideration. And I appreciate that. But Shaka, nevertheless, this is a diversion. The biggest case right now is how do we deal with a war of aggression? Congo is the victim of an invasion. It's like saying because Rwanda is efficiently governed, it should have permission to invade Congo and cause havoc and all the bloodshed simply because an elite is extracting resources illegally. It's almost like saying the United States, which is efficiently governed relative to Mexico, also has the right to invade Mexico and impose its own solutions. It's just unacceptable. That's why we have rules, international rules of law. And that is why a war of aggression is considered to be a very special kind of crime. And I submit that if this is not addressed seriously, we will see additional transgression, another invasion of Congo from Rwanda and Uganda. But it's going to be a bit more difficult this time because now we have the United States president lending his weight and his voice to the equation, and that makes a difference. And Shaka, one final point. A lot of these crises that we're dealing with today, we wouldn't be dealing with it today had we dealt with an earlier situation. In 2005, the International Court of Justice found Uganda liable for the same sort of atrocities that Rwanda is now engineering in Congo, and awarded Congo $10 billion compensation for what amounted to war crimes. And then you know what happened? Congo referred the same matter to the International Criminal Court, which then, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, started a criminal investigation to hold Uganda liable, just like al-Bashir in Sudan was held liable. And according to the article in the Wall Street Journal, June 6, 2008, President Museveni himself contacted then Secretary General Kofi Annan and urged him to block that investigation. I think that needs to be pursued further. Was in fact that investigation blocked, and by whom?
Your point is well made, but what about the fact that the Congolese so far have been unable to develop a military capacity to defend their territory and their people? Shouldn't they take that responsibility?
Yes, absolutely. And Chaka, by saying Congo does not deserve to be the victim of a war of aggression, it is not in any way exonerating President Kabila from his own responsibility. With Congo's tremendous resources, even with the constant wars of aggression and invasion, I understand that, but there must have been enough resources available to train an efficient army. But let's be honest at the same time. Congo is not just fighting M23 or all those other so-called rebels. And I don't at all accept the idea that they're rebels. This is not a rebel. This is a part of Rwanda's army. So Congo is not fighting those rebels. Congo is actually fighting Uganda, Rwanda, and those countries are beneficiaries of the most sophisticated weapons from the United States.
I am reminded of the Contras in Nicaragua, perhaps in 1980s, of course, fighting Noriega. Let's go for a break now. You are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. In a moment, we'll return to your comments and questions. But first, here is our letter of the week from Straight Talk Africa Facebook fan, Francis Loga from Aflao, Ghana, who responded to last week's question of the week when we asked, why do you think that opposition candidates generally reject election results and find it difficult to concede defeat?
Letter of the week. Francis Loga, Straight Talk Africa Facebook fan from Ghana, writes, most opposition candidates do not accept electoral results because they are not as democratic as they want the electorate to believe, and also because of their efforts to win power at all costs. This, I believe, is clearly being demonstrated by the major opposition party in Ghana, the NPP, who before the election declared they will only accept the electoral results if it goes in their favor. This, I believe, is unacceptable and must not be condoned by any means. The MPP should understand that the will of 47.74% of the electorate cannot override the will of 50.7% of the electorate. How do you expect to win a presidential election when you won 121 seats in Parliament as compared to 150 seats of the ruling party? By all standards, this has been the most well-organized election where the electorate cast their votes without fear or favor. The people have spoken, and the MPP should not subvert the will of the people.
Want news and features about Africa, life in the United States, and the world? Watch In Focus, VOA's weekday TV program to the continent. A dedicated team of international journalists delivers stories you won't find anywhere else. Co-host Nimyake Mwakalyeye and Vincent McCory on the air and on the beat. Health correspondent Lenore Madu with news to keep you healthy. And there's Sunny Young and the sunny side of sports. In Focus, TV you don't want to miss.
Did you like today's show? Write and tell us what you think, or give us some suggestions. And tell us on what station you tuned into. Here's our address: Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue, Southwest, Washington, D.C., 20237, USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website, www.voaafrica.com, or post your comments on Facebook, keyword Straight Talk Africa.
Peace talks are underway between government delegates from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and representatives of the M23 rebels in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. The current negotiations are focusing on ground rules for future meetings and guidelines for observers that may monitor the conflict zones in the eastern DRC. Therefore, here is our question of the week. What, in your view, is the solution to the ongoing political conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? Send an email to africatv@voanews.com or post a comment on our Facebook page and let us know.
Thank you very much, Sadona Andimani Nagavira Shaka, and welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington on the Voice of America. Just a reminder, we would like to hear from you, so drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com, and maybe your letter can be read on air as our letter of the week. Our email address is africatv@voanews.com, or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just put in the keyword Straight Talk Africa. Also, you can find us on the web. Just log on at voaafrica.com. We have received several correspondences from you, our audience, that we would like to share with you. We begin with a comment from Nelson Bonani of Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. He writes, "The Democratic Republic of Congo should be left alone to solve its conflicts because the so-called peacemakers are instead likely to increase confusion." Thank you very much, Nelson, for your insightful comment. Indeed, we agree with you that at the end of the day, it's up to the people of the DRC to make it happen because it is in their best interests. Peace and stability in their country can only occur if the people have the will and the commitment to understand that failure is not an option. We also have a comment from Hilda Mulenga, a Straight Talk Africa Facebook fan from the United Kingdom. She writes, "We should all wake up in Africa and limit our leaders to serving only 2 presidential terms and then step down. African countries should conduct free, fair, and credible elections with full participation of all political parties and stakeholders. As we can see, war in one nation can cause instability in neighboring countries." My sister Hilda, your constructive opinion is most appreciated. What is needed in Africa is that all cultural, ethnic, or religious communities should have the confidence that they have equal opportunities to live and flourish in their God-given countries. Indeed, we agree with those patriots who believe that Africa needs to unite by removing its artificial political boundaries so that its people can benefit and share in the continent's immense resources. Now, let's take a look at what's on tap for next week.
Next week on Straight Talk Africa, we'll replay one of your favorite programs from our 2012 archives, featuring Africa's freedom fighters. That's next week right here on Straight Talk Africa. We'll be back live on January 2nd with analysis of 2012 and a look ahead to the new year.
Thank you very much, Saduna. And we're back here, of course, Studio 47, and this is Straight Talk Africa. I think, Peter, you do have a very important point, because, frankly, it may not necessarily be the DRC, but I think there are certain situations, perhaps, which should be revisited. Because, as you said, look at Europe. We once had Yugoslavia with Field Marshal Tito. Now, the last time I checked, you have about, with Kosovo, I think you have 7 countries. And, you know, life goes on. Let's go to the lifeline of the show, go to the telephone callers. Good evening, Sanusi from Ghana.
Yeah, good evening, Shaka.
Terrific. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
You have such a wonderful voice, Sanusi.
Yeah, Shaka, thank you very much.
Profoundly
My contributions today is when you study the problem of the Democratic Republic of Congo, in my personal point of view, those 2 countries as they have personal interest in the conflict in DRC, because you are sharing a boundary with that country. If you really want to make sure there is peace in that country, you have to make sure you make your border just very tight, not allowing people to be trained in your own country to enter in other country to create a problem. So if they want peace to be free, the best thing they have to do is those 2 leaders have to take a very serious security boundary between those 2 countries and DRC. And again, they have to learn what happened to, Charles Taylor. Like I was in Ghana, when problem rise up in Cote d'Ivoire, you could see our late president come out and say, they have to deal with their personal problem. If Ghana were to be like other countries that give chance with their border to train people, Cote d'Ivoire will still have a serious war. So I'm appealing to them for them to make sure, burn up their security, because security is most important. Without the security, there will not be peace,
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Jaka.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Jacobo from South Africa. Good evening, Jacobo. You are most welcome to Straight Talk Africa. Jacobo,
good evening, Saka.
I am terrific. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you very much for the brilliant show.
Thank you, sir. You have 1 minute.
Shaka, what I'm trying to, a point I'm trying to drive is the Congo has been a problem for itself because of its wealth. Zimbabwe is unstable today because of the Congo. Many people around the Great Lakes region will tell you this, that the people in the Congo are fighting because of the wealth of the country. This is one of the most wealthiest countries in Africa, but the wealth is mismanaged. a proportion. This question is to Molenga. Molenga, your country and your president, how come when President Kabila was assassinated, was there no democratic elections in your country? Why was your country treated like a monarch? Thank you, Shaka.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Abraham from Tanzania, and then we'll ask Mulego to answer the question. Abraham, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Shaka. How are you?
Terrific. You have 30 seconds, unfortunately, because time is not our best ally.
Yeah, mine was just to challenge the Western world that they are, I should say that they are misusing the country of Congo.
Okay.
Because when there was post-election violence in Kenya, the UN came in quickly because they have invested there. But when there is a war that is going on in Congo, they don't care because the land is being used just to trap and take everything from Congo and take it to the Western world, and in other words, where they use these resources. But Congo is being left there, people killing each other, but the world doesn't really care. I'm asking the Western world plus the UN to really look at the suffering of the people of Congo. They have everything that the Western world needs, but it's like the places where the white people are living in Congo is safe. But why is it the Africans in Congo are suffering? As a Tanzanian, as a fellow Congolese who are suffering, I really want the UN to look at this. Thank you, Shaka.
Thank you very much. In fact, Mulegwa, that other question, why did you, instead of having a legitimate democratic election, instead have like a monarch? So replace Rwanda, Kabila. The other one about this international community. President Obama has called President Kagame. What, in your view, do you think the United States, and indeed the international community, should and must do in order to restore peace and stability in your country?
Well, quickly on the question of the monarchy, Congo was not a monarchy. President Kabila was appointed on a temporary basis to replace the late president. But he was then designated by all the warring parties in South Africa to be the transitional president. And right after that, we held elections, and President Kabila was elected. Now, let's go back to your question now about
elections, and the President Kabila was selected, some might say.
No, he was selected by everybody, all the warring parties, all the parties, the RCD, the MLC, and everybody else recognized him as the president who would lead the transition.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, so now the international community, I think what President Obama has done is a fantastic thing. There's more pressure needs to be put on Rwandan president, that what is important between Rwanda and the DRC is cooperation, as the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been doing. Rwanda should not be trying to come to Congo like a thug. Every time there's a small problem, they want to get stuff
But then Rwandese say that they are the ones who installed the Kabilas in power in Kinshasa.
Well, you know, Rwandese did not install President Kabila in power. There was an insurrection in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There was a rebellion to topple Mobutu, and Mobutu was toppled, and there was alliance from many countries, including Angola and other countries. So Rwanda should not have more right than anybody else who participated in that.
10 seconds, 10 please.
Well, it's wonderful that the U.S. is engaged, but ultimately this has got to be decided by Africans. Abraham is absolutely right. Africans have to decide this, and it's going to be decided on good governance, governments that deliver services to the people, and govern effectively.
On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Dr. Peter Palm, Director Michael S. Ansari Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, Mlegwazi Hindura, President of the Center for Political and Strategic Studies based in Bukavu and Kinshasa. Mlegwazi Hindura formerly served as the spokesperson for President Joseph Kabila. And last but not least, Milton Alimadi, founder and publisher of the Black Star News, one of New York's investigative newspapers, who joined us from our New York studios. Thanks to you all and to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. If you're listening to us on the Voice of America, special English is coming up next, and tomorrow morning is Daybreak Africa with James Bate. On behalf of the Voice of America, thanks for tuning into Straight Talk Africa. In the meantime, get better, not beat, and please remember to keep the African hopes alive.